Hi, Hana family, and welcome back to another episode. You'll notice a recurring theme of Florida in this week's episodes, and that's because I was lucky enough to take a trip to Florida. More on whether or not I enjoyed my first visit to the state of Florida later, but for now, sit back, enjoy this episode, and if you like it, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Story 1. Many houses, many hauntings. My story starts about 13 years ago, when my parents, my older sister, and I were living in Florida. My sister was about 3 at the time, and I was 1. My sister used to sit up in bed at night and cry because she said there was a little blue man sitting in a chair by her door. To this day, she still swears that she was not lying. The next year, we moved, shortly before my 2nd birthday. We never had any problems in that house until the day my dad left. I was 3, maybe 4 at the time. I don't remember the exact date, but I remember what happened. My dad was in his room, and I was sitting in the arm of our couch. To my right was a wooden wall, with an entertainment center blocking half of it. I was crying and watching the hallway that led to the bedrooms, waiting for my dad to come out. When he did, he was carrying a large brown suitcase. I remember begging him not to leave, but he told me that he had to, and he walked out the door. I was both sad and angry at the same time. Then I looked over towards the wooden wall. Part of the wall that was visible was covered in demon faces, and they were all laughing as my dad left the house. After that, the TV and the lights would turn off and on by themselves, and other strange things would happen. We moved twice in the few years after that, eventually out of the state. But nothing interesting happened there. The third move was into a duplex that was part of a neighborhood funded by Charles Page. The neighborhood was supposedly built on an old Indian burial ground. I didn't have any problems at first, but then, after about 2 years, the voices started. When I was alone, they would call my name. That went on for a long time. Then, one night, my sister, her friend, and I were recording a conversation we were having. When we played the tape back, there was a man's voice on the tape saying, "So?" in response to a comment that I had made. We searched for a logical explanation to what had happened, but there was simply none. No one was allowed outside after 10 p.m. It was 11 p.m. at the time. There was no men in the house. The TV was not on, nor was the radio, and the voice certainly did not match any of ours. We still have not figured out what it was. A year ago, we had to move. We moved into a small 3-bedroom house that was not far from where we had been living. The house was barely livable, but we had to move on such short notice that this was the only house we could find. The house was haunted, and no matter how many times we blessed it, the ghost always came back. The first experience I had was a voice calling my name. There were also times when I could feel a presence, as though someone was watching me. Then, one night, as I was walking past my bedroom, I happened to glance inside. There was a bright blue ball of light floating at the foot of my bed. Needless to say, I moved my bed. Now, I had my bed arranged on the right wall, with my TV at the foot of it, so that I could see the door clearly, no matter what. I saw the ghost. I was sitting at the foot of my bed, just about to turn my TV on, but for some reason I hesitated. I sat there, staring at my own reflection in the TV. Then suddenly, a boy appeared behind me, leaning forward, with his face next to mine. His eyes were wide, and he was smiling. There was something about his smile that scared me immensely. I still have his image burned into my mind. I was too scared to scream, but I did manage to turn around, though of course no one was there. After that, I couldn't sleep in my bedroom anymore. I dragged the mattress off the bed and slept on the floor of the living room. The second time I saw the ghost, he was sitting at the foot of my bed, staring at the floor. He looked to be about 16 or 17. His hair was black and about to his shoulders. He wore jeans and a white t-shirt. While he still scared me, it wasn't nearly as bad as before. He wasn't smiling then. In fact, it actually looked as though he were crying. The next time I saw him, it was like being at a murder scene. I was in the bathroom, brushing my hair, when I looked over the bathtub, and there was the boy. I nearly fainted when I saw him. He was lying in the bathtub, dead, in a pool of his own blood. His wrists were slit, as was his throat. His eyes and his mouth were open wide, as if he were trying to scream. A few nights later, I saw a hand reach out of one of my drawers, latch onto the side of it, and pull itself back in. The last time I saw him, I was home alone, in my bedroom, playing video games. I had just gotten off the phone with my ex-boyfriend, and was turning off the TV, when my door opened, about 3 inches, and I saw a hand and an eye. Whatever it was stayed there for just a moment, before turning and walking away. I heard 3 footsteps, then nothing else. Now that was the experience that scared me the most. First of all, my door frame was half rotted, so my door did not close on its own. Instead, I had to prop a box in front of it to keep it closed. My cats can't push the door open with the box there, and even if they could, that wouldn't explain the hand or the eye that I saw, nor the footsteps. Second, the light in my room should have illuminated the entire body of whoever was standing there. Third, I only heard 3 footsteps and nothing else. It takes at least 20 steps to get from my door, and the only window that was close to my door had an air conditioner in it. Nonetheless, I ran out of the room into the dining room, turned on the light. I didn't see anything, so I ran through the house, checking all the doors and all the windows, all of which were locked. By that time I was panicking. My mom should have been home by then, and I wanted to call her, but the phone was in my bedroom. So instead, I sat on the couch in the living room. I started crying from fear. After a while, I got up the nerve to run into my room and grab the phone. I called my mom, and she rushed home as fast as she could. When she got there, she told me of a ghost she had seen in the house. A girl, whom she saw standing in the doorway of the living room. That frightened me even more, and I couldn't sleep that night. I didn't see the ghost again, though I did feel him. I would occasionally sleep in my room, and when I did, I could feel him sitting or lying on the bed next to me. There was one time he actually laid his hand on my shoulder, and I could feel his breath on my neck. My room was always cold compared to the rest of the house. After a while, the ghost started becoming more and more frequent, almost a daily basis. Although I never did see him, I could feel him sitting on my mattress as I slept, or watching over me as I stayed up late into the night. I grew very used to him, and then my mother decided it was time to move. He stopped coming altogether. I've yet to have anything happen at our new house, and I'm hoping it stays that way. Story 2. The Trailer. Back in the early 90s, my now ex-husband and I lived in a trailer in Tampa, Florida. My oldest son was only 3 years old, and our other child was only a year old. Ever since my oldest was born, we had this entity that followed us. I'd seen it several times, but I always thought it was my father-in-law that was never able to see his grandchildren while he was alive. This thing was not bad, but it did show up at the darndest times. I would see him staring at me from the end of the hall, and I once saw him in our bathroom. He would hide things from us. Among, the usual things that ghosts find amusing. I used to stay up late at night, and he would walk down the hall and stop at the couch, stand there for a while, and then go back to the other end of the trailer. This never really bothered me, but it was unnerving at times. My ex really didn't believe me about that part. He thought I was making up more of this than there was. So one night I told him to stay up with me, so that he could find out for himself. He did, and wouldn't you guess it, as that thing was walking down the hall, my ex started to squeeze my arm. It stopped, then turned around, and walked right back down the hall. By this time I was used to it. It wasn't bad, it was just there. Then, about 2 months later, I realized that my son was talking to it. I watched him from the crack of his bedroom door, talking to someone in his closet, playing with toys. Then at nap time, he would tell me that Papa said he was a good boy for eating his lunch, and that Papa said he was a good boy for cleaning up his toys. This was getting to be a little much, because I thought that maybe it would lead to worse things. I've always been interested in the paranormal and such. I believe in ghosts and demons. I didn't want the latter to come to my son and harm him. But I was too late in thinking about this. 3 days went by, and my son said nothing about Papa, and his room was ice cold. I had him sleeping with us and the other baby, because his room was cold enough to see your breath in. I told my husband I wanted to move, but he said we really didn't have the money at the time. Then, on the 3rd night, I had the boys sleeping in my bedroom, the oldest in my bed and the other in his crib. We fell asleep in the living room, watching TV. About 2 a.m., we woke up to my oldest son screaming in a frantic way. We ran into the room, and he said that the bite was squeezing his legs. When I picked him up, his legs were white at the bottom, like they had been squeezed very, very hard. My husband grabbed the baby, and I grabbed our oldest son, and we went into the living room to try to soothe our children. The baby didn't wake up at all. In fact, through the whole ordeal, it never affected our youngest, only our oldest. I asked him what the bite was, and he told me it was a big and hairy, snotty-nosed, big-teeth creature, and that it looked like what he called a walking animal. I thought he had just one really bad dream and tried to put him back to sleep, but he would have none of that. I even put the marks on his legs out of my mind until the next night. The next night, he didn't want to go to sleep in his room or mine. He said that the bite would come back. I let him fall asleep on the couch with me while my husband slept in our room with the baby. About 12 that night, I was still watching TV on the couch. Our oldest was laying next to me when I heard it for the first time. It ran and stomped all the way down the hall. It was hard enough to make the trailer shake. As it got to the end of the hall, it stomped again. My husband came out of the room and asked what in the world was going on. I just looked at him and said, very scared at that point, that I think it was the bite. He put the baby in the playpen, and we pulled out the sofa bed so we could all sleep in the same room. We sat up for a while talking about what we might be going through, and then we slowly drifted off to sleep. A short time later, the oldest woke again, screaming about the bite. He said that it was in the room with us, and that it was going to get Daddy. This was the worst feeling we've ever had, because at that point, the room started to smell like sewer waste. It was like the smell was a thick fog or something. The smell was so thick that I thought it was going to suffocate us. I prayed out loud for a few minutes and rebuked whatever it was that was scaring my child. It finally left, and we didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next day, we left the house and went to look for a new house to move into. As soon as we arrived back at our house, our oldest son got scared, and he threw up black stuff. We hadn't eaten anything black that day, so I don't really understand. We couldn't find another house that we could afford at the time, so we took turns staying up, watching over our oldest child. It came back several times after that within a month's time frame, enough to scare our oldest child while he was awake also. It one time ran between my husband and myself. You could hear it and you could smell it, but you couldn't see it. Only our oldest could see it. He would scream, "No, Mommy, no, Daddy," as it ran between. I tried to explain to him that it couldn't harm Mommy or Daddy, that it was just trying to scare him. But all the same, it was torturing my son, and I was completely helpless. The stench was so bad. The feeling was so bad. My poor baby was terrified. And to make things worse, that night, when it was my turn to sleep, it touched me not once, but twice, just to show me that it could touch us. We would let our oldest sleep in our arms so that he felt safe, but it didn't always keep him from waking up scared to death that the bite was going to get us. After a lot of praying and a pastor blessing the house 3 different times, it seemed to go away. A month went by, and we could finally afford to move. We moved into an upstairs apartment, and about 2 years went by. All was well, and we welcomed another baby boy to our family. One morning, While my oldest was helping me change the baby's diaper, he told me that a little Indian girl named Nunca came to his window, second floor window, and was telling him that she was scared, that she could not find her mommy and daddy. I asked my oldest how she could come to his window when we lived on the second floor, and he told me that he didn't know, but that she was just there. I asked him what she was wearing, and he said light blue clothes. And he said that she looked tired because her eyes looked funny. He then said that she told him that he could fly, and that he should jump out the window. Well, that was it. I got his clothes, I got his brother's clothes out of the room, along with some of the toys, and I locked his door shut. I went downstairs to my aunt's house and was telling her this. I then prayed over the apartment. I was truly afraid for my son. This was now too many times that he had been affected by something paranormal. A few days later, while down at my aunt's house with all of the children, we heard someone running around from room to room in my apartment. My aunt asked who was in my apartment, and I said no one, that I had locked the door on my way out. She was scared and asked me to go check, and that she would keep the children for me while I did. I went up the stairs, and I heard someone in the apartment, like they were going from room to room looking for something. I unlocked the door and flung it open wide, and I caught a glimpse of someone short running into the hall. Not thinking, I ran after it, but I couldn't find anyone. I was scared, as you can imagine, and ran back downstairs, locking the door behind me. Then I called my church and asked my pastor what I could do. He asked me to bring my oldest son to him so that he could teach my oldest son the Lord's Prayer, and that God was in his heart and that there was nothing stronger or mightier than God. My oldest son no longer has problems since then, and he's a very good little boy. He doesn't remember anything about the Indian girl. He says that she was really scared looking, and that he was glad that God was there to protect him from those kinds of things.